What is the concept of the golden circle, which you've coined, and how can identifying one's why, how can that be used to improve personal and professional success?
So every single one of us knows what we do. This is the job you have, the things you do. Everybody can answer that question very easily. Some people know how they do it. These are the things that they think make them different or stand out from the crowd. But very, very few people can clearly articulate why they do what they do, that underlying purpose, cause, or belief. To make money is not a why, it's a result. It's not a cause or a purpose. It literally comes at the end. And what I learned is that all the most inspirational leaders, whether it's political leaders, social leaders, business leaders, or organizations, Martin Luther King, Steve Jobs, all of them, they all think, act, and communicate the exact same way. It's the complete opposite to the rest of us. They all start with why. And so when I realized that there are these three levels, and most of us know two of them, you have to know all three to live a life in balance, to live a life that, colloquially would be referred to as authentic. But also it brings greater impact and greater joy.
What are the three levels?
Why, how, and what.
Why, how, and what?
Yeah. So we know what we do. We know how we do it. We need to know why. So the why is in the bullseye. So I don't think the why is more important. It's just the piece that's forgotten.
Interesting. And do you find that people who tend to not be as successful tend to not have a clear vision of what in fact their why is?
Depends how you define success. I mean, obeying or following the golden circle and having a clarity of why is not the only way to be successful, but it's pretty much the only way to have lasting success that brings you a sense of fulfillment and joy along the way. People can be successful by ignoring all of this, however you want to define it, but it comes at tremendous stress and it doesn't last.
And why is having a why so important?
So every single one of us has been in flow at some point in our lives, where you're just loving the work that you're doing. And it's not about the amount of hours you work, like you can work really hard at something, but it's like, it's fun, we've all been in flow where just like everything's just hitting, but the problem is we don't know how to make that happen. It usually happens sort of by accident. And so understanding your why gives you much more clarity in how you make decisions so you can live a life with purpose, on purpose. So in other words, that sense of flow and joy and ease comes more regularly. Most of us treat our careers and indeed our lives like a game of roulette, which is we try things and sometimes it's in flow and sometimes it's not. And we've all been there where we're like, I've done this 1,000 times. How come this feels like shit this time? So that's what a why does. It makes that state come more often.
Where were you in your life when you stumbled upon this insight?
It was a bunch of years ago. I had a small business. I had a little marketing consultancy, and by all superficial standards, I should have been happy. Everything looked good, but I wasn't. And I kept that feeling to myself, mainly because I was embarrassed. I didn't want to complain, like, I don't want to go to work, I hate my life, because superficially everything was good. So all of my energy went into pretending that I was happier, more in control, and more successful than I really felt, which is not a great place to be. And if anybody's ever been in a dark place will know that if you keep it to yourself, it only gets darker. And it wasn't until a dear friend of mine came to me and said, something's different, something's wrong. And I came clean and lifted a huge weight off my shoulders. And the energy that went into lying, hiding, and faking every day could be redirected to trying to refine my passion. And that's where I found the golden circle.
Wow. And was there a specific moment? Was it when your friend asked you that question?
No, it wasn't an epiphany. Well, not in the traditional sense, like I went from nothing to poof. Like most ideas evolve, and there might be a moment that we call epiphany where it's like doing a jigsaw puzzle. It's like you don't start with a piece of pieces, a table full of pieces, and all of a sudden you have a picture. That's not how it works. You piece them together, kind of knowing, kind of with a system, kind of randomly. And at some point you're like, I can see what I'm supposed to be building here. And so it's like that. The epiphany comes when the picture emerges, but not in the building of it. So I'd been building it my entire life, but the picture emerged shortly after that. How would you describe your why? To inspire people to do the things that inspire them so that together each of us can change our world for the better.
Wow.
And it is the reason I get out of bed in the morning. It has never changed my entire life. It's the greatest compliment anyone can ever pay me is that was inspiring, or you inspired me. Like, that fills my cup more than anything else anybody can say to me.
And it existed prior to you even being aware of it.
Of course. Our why is like the foundation of a house, right? It's something you build upon. You only have one your whole life. It never changes because you're the product of your upbringing. You are who you are based on how you were raised and the experiences you had when you were a kid. That makes you who you are. Whether you live in balance with who you are and make decisions consistent with who you are is a different conversation. But it's the foundation of a house. It's not necessarily visible, but it's what gives you solidity and structure. And you build upon it you can change the house design as many times as you want. That can change with fashion and whatever else, but the foundation is always the same. That's what a why is.
Wow. For people listening to this, watching this, that haven't yet been so lucky as to identify their why, do you have any tools, exercises that might help?
So there's many ways to do it. I offer multiple ways depending on what somebody's preference is. I wrote a book called Find Your Why if you want to do it that way. We have a course on our website if you want to do it that way. But I can tell you a little exercise that you can do for free with a friend, which gets you pretty much in the ballpark. It's called the Friends exercise. Find a friend you love and who loves you. The person who, if you called them at 3 o'clock in the morning, they'd be there for you, and vice versa. Do not do this with a spouse, a sibling, a parent. It does not work. Those relationships are too close. Do it with a best friend and ask them this simple question: why are we friends? And they're going to look at you like you're insane, because the part of the brain that controls all of that love and passion and loyalty doesn't control language. So it's hard to put our feelings into words biologically. And then you stop asking the question why, and you actually transition to the question what. And they're going to be like, I don't know. And you say, come on, what specifically is it about me that I know that you would be there for me no matter what? And they go, I don't know. And they'll start describing you. You're always there for me. I trust you. And you have to play devil's advocate. You can't help them. You can't let anybody else help them. They have to go through the process. And you play devil's advocate. You say, that's just the definition of a friend. What is it specifically about me? And again, they're going to go through this multiple times, trying to describe you, and you play devil's advocate. You have that with multiple people. That's the definition of a best friend. What specifically is it about me? And eventually they'll give up. And eventually they'll give up trying to describe you, and they'll stop and describe themselves. And this is what my friends said to me. They said, I don't know, Simon. All I know is I can sit in a room with you. I don't even have to talk to you, and I feel inspired. And I got goosebumps. And that's what will happen. They'll say something about their own lives, and you'll either well up with tears or have goosebumps. You'll have an emotional reaction. And that's when you know that you're in the ballpark of your why. And if you do it with multiple friends, they will say very similar, if not the exact same thing.
Wow.
Because the value you give to the world is the thing that they want in their lives, which is why we're not friends with everybody.
Wow, so cool. I wonder what my friends would say about me.
You'll have to find out.
Yeah. What a cool exercise. And so now what do you do all these like seminars, you talk to countries at events, conferences all around the world. What would you say are the biggest issues that most people face, barriers that most people face standing in the way of them and whatever success it is that they desire? Is it just a lack of being able to identify their why? I'm sure that people, once they've found their why, there are still, significant barriers.
I think the question's too broad. Depending on which author you're talking to or which, what somebody's got to sell, everybody's a hammer looking for a nail. I can't say what one thing is the barrier. I can tell you some of the things that help.
Yeah.
I can tell you what's worked for me.
Yeah.
And I can say that learning my why has had profound and positive impact in my life, and my entire career and life that I live right now would not be anything close to what it is if I didn't have that experience. I'm living proof that having a plan is hilarious, because it doesn't go according to plan. There's literally nothing in my life that's on plan. And in fact, so many of the things not only are not on plan, they're actually the reverse of what I wanted to do. I never thought I had a book in me, and I'm not one of those people that like, one day I'm going to write a book, and I've written 5, I never wanted to be a public speaker. That was never an ambition. In fact, my happy place is behind the scenes. I actually never wanted to be in front of an audience ever. Never wanted to be an actor, never wanted to be, and even in high school or college, if I got involved with theater, I was always behind the scenes, like the stage manager or something like that. But I had a message, and I believed it was important to share it, and the opportunities that arose were invitations to come speak to audiences, and I just kept saying yes, because the opportunity to spread the message was more important than whatever arbitrary path that I would choose for the quote-unquote thing I want to do. Which is why I think it's funny when people say, this is what I want to do, but they don't know why they want to do it. You know, the number of people who come to me and say, can you give me advice? I want to be a public speaker. I'm like, great, what do you want to talk about? They're like, I don't know yet. I'm like, no, that's not how it works. You have to have an absolute drive for something, and then you'll figure out the best way to bring it to life. You know, but I think a lot of people start with the route before they know the destination.
Wow. We're super similar in that way. I think we've got very similar backgrounds. I was mentioning to you off air, I had worked for Current TV for many years, which was the Al Gore television network. And I at that point probably would not have been able to define my why, but when my mom became sick in 2011, my why became very crystallized. It became about how I can reduce suffering in the world, within the scope of health, wellness, longevity, nutrition, all that stuff. And I had never, if you would have asked me 10 years ago if I would ultimately one day be an author, not just an author, but an author with multiple books under their belt, I would have not believed you.
Yeah.
I would have thought you were trolling me or I was being punked or something. But once that why became clear, it's just like, it permeates everything you do.
And I would push you further. When you say you want to reduce or end suffering, you caveated by saying within the realm of sort of wellness and fitness. I would take, that's just a route. That's one of the roads. You've found that wellness and fitness and all that stuff is one of the routes to reduce suffering. But I would argue that it's bigger than that. That if it's to reduce suffering, then I would argue that, you know, who you are as a friend is somebody who's there when, you know, people are going through the hardest times, and you offer a safe space for them to go through it. And I would bet that you help reduce suffering when there's no fitness and no nutrition involved. So why limit your why to an industry? It's how you show up in the world, and that's a much higher standard, because now you have to be that as, you know, as a partner, you have to be that as a friend, you have to be that as a son, you have to be that as a citizen in the world, you have to, and you have to be that as a businessman. So why limit yourself?
Well, you're totally right.
Like, you're either in the world to reduce suffering or you're not. It's not just through one mechanism.
Well, is it sufficient then to just have a why, or do you also need to do the work to identify the skill set that makes you unique?
Yeah, I mean, that's what the golden circle has 3 levels. It's the deep-seated purpose, cause, or belief. It's the values and behaviors you use to bring that cause to life. And then there's the what's, which is the tangible manifestations, you know? So a book is a tangible manifestation, a public talk or some nutrition program, whatever it is. These are all easy to see and easy to measure. Those are at the what level. You have to have all 3. That's why I said I don't believe the why is more important. It's as important, except it's the most often ignored or hard to articulate piece, which is why I focused on it. There's a million books written on how to do things, process, strengths, you know, unique selling propositions, whatever you want to call them. They're all kind of the same thing. Every personality test is the hows. I mean, that's literally what they are. And they work in concert. So if you are all why and no execution, then you're going to live in a hippie commune, and you're also going to live a very unfulfilled life, because it's all belief and kumbaya, but you don't actually get anything done. Like, that's equally as unfulfilling as the grind of getting lots of things done, but not having any sense of direction or higher sense of purpose or cause. It's the same, 2 sides of the same coin.
You know what I found to be a really tactical representation of why being able to identify your why is so important is in the face of criticism.
Yeah.
You know, it's like when you have a why, criticism tends to be like rain on the windshield.
How does it work for you?
Well, because I have a North Star, and that North Star is bigger than myself, it's something that I aim myself towards with everything that I do. You know, the occasional affront to my ego, work that I put out, it's ultimately inconsequential, because I know, you know, I'm a fallible human, but my goal is not. My goal is pristine. My goal is pure and well-intentioned And so yeah, so the criticism is like, I would imagine when a missionary is evangelizing the word of God, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they encounter tumult,
Mm-hmm.
trials, tribulations, but
Mm-hmm.
They've got their eye on this thing that's greater than themselves, that keeps them moving.
I agree.
Jordan Peterson, I think, called it a noble aim.
Yeah. I agree with a caveat that to be blind to criticism or to ignore criticism at all costs means that your blind spots will also never be revealed. So you might be very confident on the path that you're on, but you're not realizing that the end of that path is a cliff, and everybody's screaming at you that there's a cliff, and you say, stop criticizing me, this is my path. Don't harsh on my mellow. So I think that for me, anyway, I can only speak for myself. I think that when people attack me or criticize me or say silly things that I know not to be true, I mean, whatever, I agree with you. I'm focused on something else. Thank you, but I'm good, But if somebody gives me constructive criticism that I can learn from, and even if it's not 100%, but they're onto something, and I don't necessarily want to admit it because it hurts a little bit, maybe I should listen, So I think it's not so much that I'm closed to criticism because I'm so focused on my cause. It's that I'm a better filter of criticism because I'm focused on my cause.
There's that viral Keanu Reeves quote. Somebody quoted him as saying something to the effect of, at this stage in life, if somebody disagrees with me, I just reply, "You're right," smile, and walk away.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of truth to that. If you accidentally cut somebody off on a road, and they go nuts and start yelling at you and giving you the finger, usually what we do is we give it back, or you can just raise your hand and say sorry, and move on with your life. Or maybe you didn't cut them off, and they went nuts, or maybe they cut you off. Who cares, And when you get angry, you're still thinking and talking about it. You get to lunch and you're like, you'll never believe what, that occupies stress and brain, matter, thinking about something that is largely inconsequential, and it happens to me too. I keep myself in check. Somebody accidentally cuts me off, or maybe they did it on purpose, who knows, but they cut me off and I have to brake a little bit. And my instinct is to swear and give them the finger because they did that. And I remind myself, I'm paying attention to the road. I braked. My brakes worked. Nothing happened. Life goes on, right? Everything worked the way it's supposed to work, I used to date an air traffic controller, and I had a fear of getting on night flights because I had an emergency landing during a night flight once, and I was just sort of freaked out flying at night anymore. And when I was telling her about this, she goes, "Oh my God, did everybody die?" I went, "No." She goes, "So what you're telling me is that the air traffic controllers and the pilots and the crew knew exactly what to do to get you down safely when there was an emergency?" And I went, "Yeah." She goes, "Oh, okay." And things work. Not always, but things work. Traffic lights work. We don't run red lights, and it works. And occasionally when it doesn't work, even then we have systems like pay attention to the reason it's important to pay attention to the road is when it doesn't work or when someone makes a mistake. But if we didn't pay attention, then we'd cause harm to ourselves or others. And I think it's just a good philosophy for life, which is sort of live life with your eyes open, because it's not going to go perfectly and you're going to have to react. And when you get criticism, it's one of those things okay, how do I want to react to this? I sort of have a test for how I make decisions, which is what good will come of this? That's literally goes through my head. For me to go apeshit and curse at somebody, what good will come of this? Nothing. I'll rile myself up. I'll rile them up. I'll ruin two people's days. Or I know, you have to send that angry email. What good will come of this? And if anybody responds, well, it's the principle. I'm like, really? Is it? Or is it that you just want to be the last person to be heard? You want to get the last word. And It's like when people hate you and they unfollow you on Instagram or something, they always announce, I'm unfollowing you. I'm like, okay. Like, why the announcement? Nobody shows up and says, I'm following you, And it's their story. I don't criticize them for it, but it's not my story. And so how I react, and you see the way we react to people's comments online. And my answer is, what good will come of this? And if good will come of it, then do it. But if no good will come of it, or nothing will come of it, does the decision need to be made? And sometimes the best decisions are no decisions, or just saying, sorry, on me. And I think that's another thing, not to sort of go down the rabbit hole, but saying you're sorry doesn't mean you're wrong. It just means you take accountability for the thing that happened. That's it, right? So think about it like you're in the airport and you're walking across the terminal with your wheelie bag, and you accidentally bump someone's foot, okay? What do? You turn around and go, sorry, immediately. Now, are you wrong? No. Did you do it on purpose? No. But do you take accountability for the mere fact that it's your wheelie bag every time, right? Now, imagine if it was reversed, that somebody runs their wheelie bag over your foot. If they turn around and say sorry immediately, you're good, right? Even if it hurts, you're like, no, that hurt, but thank you, But what if they say nothing? And they just turn at you and you go, what's up? And they're going to go, I didn't do it on purpose. They're like, your bag hit my foot. You're like, whatever, I didn't intend it. Right? Like, saying you're sorry doesn't mean you're wrong. It just means you take accountability for the fact that it's your wheelie bag. It means you take accountability for the fact that it's your reaction, your words, something you set in motion. That's all it is. And for some reason, we have this twisted notion that saying you're sorry is admission of guilt. It's not. And so sometimes just saying sorry to move on, because they are your words and they are your actions, is the right thing to do. Again, what good will come of this? So it's a good test for living a happier life.
Yeah. Is it ever difficult for you to practice non-reactivity?
It's always difficult to practice. And by the way, it's not about non-reactivity. Is the action appropriate? Is the response appropriate? But of course, I'm a human being. I have, emotions, and I have adrenaline, and I'm running late, or I'm tired, or I'm just in a pissy mood, and sometimes I'm not proud of my reactions. And sometimes I don't get to apologize to the person because it's over and it's long gone, and I sort of have to privately take accountability to myself, of course. But you want those to be fewer and fewer and fewer as your life progresses. But they're going to happen forever. No one can say that their reactions are perfect every time. That doesn't exist. It's a striving like anything else in the world.
Yeah. Stress and burnout are big topics today. How can one continue to prioritize their health and well-being while pursuing their goals?
Okay, so there's a flaw in that whole logic train, right? Which is, you made it about an individual. It's about me, my stress, my goals, me. And human beings are social animals, and we are not very good at doing anything by ourselves, which is why we consider solitary confinement a form of torture. The worst thing you can do to a human being is take away the people. And so the reason we see stress and burnout on the increase, and anxiety and depression, and in the worst case scenarios, antisocial behaviors or harmful behaviors like suicide, right? The reason those things are on the rise is largely because we're probably feeling lonelier. In other words, it's the loneliness that produces the feelings, not the feelings that produce the loneliness. There's a study done way like in the 50s or 60s. That study is the underpinning for a lot of our understanding of addiction today, where they put a rat in a cage and they gave it two choices of water, plain water or drug-laced water. It tried both, liked the drug-laced water, kept taking the drug-laced water, got addicted, and eventually died, right? But a guy by the name of, I think it's Bruce Alexander, a bunch of years later, recognized that the experiment was flawed, that rats, like human beings, are social animals. And we put a rat by itself in a cage, so it was lonely. And so it became addicted to the drugs because it was lonely, not the other way around. And so he redid the experiment where he put lots of rats in a cage and put mazes and fun things to do, and they were having babies and relationships. And he put two waters, one drug-laced, one plain, and they tried both, and they tried enough to get addicted, but they can see from the data about the amount of water they consumed that the drug-laced water went in decline. They drank the regular water more often. In other words, when we have healthy relationships, we're less likely to get addicted. So all of this thing about cell phones and social media, it's all true, and those are very dangerous dopamine producing things. But it raises the question that if we have really strong, healthy friendships, we become less susceptible to the addictive qualities of those things. So the thing that we're missing is friends. And if you ask most people, are you a good friend? Most people say yes. But the reality is we're not, right? And if you think about the value of friendship, right? So you said we see the rise of all these things, depression, anxiety, lack of stress coping mechanisms, even the obsession with longevity. Well, friendship fixes all of those things, literally. People with close friends live longer, they're healthier, they have lower levels of stress, depression, and they live longer. I said that one. Friendship is the ultimate biohack. But people don't, they work on their nutrition, they work on their exercise. How many people are working on their friendships? We know that marriages, you talk to great marriages and say, what's your secret? They all say exactly the same thing. It's a lot of work, and we do the work. When was the last time you did work on your friendships? Like when there's a violation of trust in a relationship, you don't immediately walk away from the relationship. You kind of try and work through it and see if you can get through it. The number of times that there's a violation of trust in a friendship, we go, we just can't be friends anymore, and we walk away. Do we take time to read books or watch talks or read articles about how to communicate better with our friends, how to have conflict with our friends? Like, there's an entire industry to help us be better leaders. There's an entire industry to help us be better parents. There's an entire industry to teach us how to eat better, exercise better, even have better marriages. And yet there's precious little to nothing to help us be better friends. And I, for one, believe that friendship is the most underrated, undervalued, most important element of being a social animal in a very, very difficult world. And so the answer to your question is work on your friendships, and all those other things get fixed.
Wow. What are the best ways to nurture those relationships?
One is prioritization. Like, I know you would cancel on a friend because you had a meeting. Would you cancel on a meeting because you have something with a friend? Well, my friend would understand, right? We prioritize our careers almost always before our friendships. Let's start there. Now, it doesn't have to be a rule. You don't always have to prioritize your friends, but we can probably get the balance better. Do you know how to react when your friends are going through a hard time? Do you try and fix them? Do you get on the phone and be like, all right, here's what you need to do. Buck out of it. Why are you so depressed? Everybody loves you. You're great. Is that what you try and do? You try and fix them and change their mind? Or do you go to their house, get into bed with them, watch movies all day, and just be depressed with them so they don't feel alone?
Yeah, the latter.
What happens when you have tension with a friend? Do you know how to address that tension? Have you taken a listening class on active listening so that your friends feel seen and heard and understood? Like, are you doing the work? Are you doing the work to be a friend? Most of us are crap at listening. We try and fix our friends' problems. We take them for granted. We expect them to be there. I think younger generations, on balance, it's not exclusive, but on balance, struggle even more. They would even admit, they've told me, that they love their friends, they have fun with their friends, but they wouldn't go to their friends in like a dark time, and they wouldn't be surprised if their friends canceled on them because they got better plans. That's called loneliness, right? And the easiest way to make better friends is to be a better friend. One of the things that, as I've been talking about this, has surprised me, that people at all ages, at all success levels, talk about how they're struggling to make friends.
Wow.
And that's hard too. Like, how do I make a friend? People are shy. They're afraid of being judged. They don't know how to start a conversation. And there's all these new groups popping up to help people make friends, which I think are great. But I think that's one of the things we need to do as well, which is, do we even know how to make a friend, right? We blame ourselves, well, I'm an introvert, I'm a this, I'm a that. I just don't, but that's one of the hurdles we have to overcome.
You always hear this anecdote that it becomes more difficult from people that are older to make friends as you get older. Is there any truth to that?
Definitely, from what I've heard from the people who are talking to me about it, yes. Sometimes because you've got, a spouse, you've got kids, you've got different levels of responsibility, and you live at home with the family. And so how do you go and make a friend, right? Usually parents make friends with other parents, through their kids.
Yeah.
I mean, that makes sense. But if you were a salesperson and you needed to, every salesperson knows this, which is it's a hustle, and not everything works out, but you kind of you got to make the phone calls. If you don't make the phone calls, You're not going to make the sales. And to some degree, there's some truth to that as well, which is, if you've met a few people that you kind of like and you connected with a little bit, like write all their names on a Post-it and put them by the, on the fridge or something. And every now and then maybe call one of them and have a conversation. Maybe every now and then call one of them and say, you want to meet for a coffee? You want to meet for lunch or dinner? Like make a point to make the calls, to make the friends, because they're not going to make themselves. And invest in the friendships that you have. We also have this twisted sense that where we treat friends a little bit like family. Now, family and friends are very, very different because you get to choose your friends. You don't get to choose your family, right? And sometimes we do treat friends like family where we've known them for so long, we treat them as if they can't be changed. And very often we've outgrown people. We're on different growth paths. And I know I've been friends with you for 15, 20 years, but I mean, we don't have anything in common anymore. Like your life went in one direction, mine went in another direction. I still adore you, but I have less in common with you now than I did when our lives were very similar. And so it's okay to drift apart. Like that's okay, because I know people who spend time with their old friends because they feel like they have to, because the only bond is time. They don't actually have anything in common anymore. And somebody just revealed this to me recently, actually, just this last weekend, where he realized he was spending time with old friends and he would show up and act. He would pretend to be the guy he used to be.
Wow.
Because that's the guy that they wanted to be friends with, but that's not who he is anymore. And he had to come to this realization, like, I think we're different and we've outgrown each other, and that's okay. And we, even if those old friendships, if the bond is only time, if there's a there, then you have to foster it. You have to nurse it. And by the way, I completely disagree with the whole idea is, you hear people talking, like we overuse the term family, like you hear people talking about it in business, like, our team is like a family. And somebody goes, how can it be like a family? You never fire family members and you fire. Well, that's actually not true either. We all have an uncle who's freaking nuts and we don't invite them to Thanksgiving. We don't want them there because they're nuts, right? So we do exclude family members. So the point is like you do get to choose who you spend time with, friends and family, and choose wisely, because the people you spend time with will have an impact on you. And there's a lot of data on this, like a group of smokers, and one of the friends decides to stop smoking, and like 80% of them stop smoking, or 90% of them stop smoking, or one of a friend group decides to get into shape, and they all get into shape. And it has ripples. It goes from like 90% to 30% to 10% to 7%. Like it has like multiple ripples to multiple friend groups that you don't even know. And so you are your friends and your friends are you. And so you're spending time with people who, and by the way, when I talk about friends, not all friends need to be deep, meaningful relationships. Some of them can be silly and superficial and I just have fun with them, but I'm not calling them in a freaking crisis, but I like hanging out with them. That's totally fine. Like there are levels and layers of friendship. But the point I'm trying to make is we have too many superficial friends. We have too many friends that we just have fun with. We need more friends that are deep, meaningful relationships that when the shit hits the fan, I call them up and I go, I'm struggling. And I have a rule with my friends, which is no crying alone.
No crying alone.
No crying alone, which is if you are overwhelmed by something social, you had a bad thing happen in your private life, work has got you, you feel alone, you're not allowed to be in that state alone. You pick up the phone, you call me or one of your other friends, it doesn't matter. And you say, you have a minute? Yeah. Can I just vent? Yeah. Can I just cry? Yeah. Can I just borrow you for a minute? Yeah. That's the rule. No crying alone. And it doesn't happen often, but when it happens, I had a friend call me. She was going through a rough time, and A-type, super successful, personality. And she called me up and said, do you have a minute? I went, yeah. She goes, not a good place. I go, tell me more. She goes, I would go to my husband, but he's not in a good place either. And I know he doesn't have the bandwidth for me, and I don't want to put this on him. So I'm calling you. And I go, yeah, what do you need? And she and I he was my friend first. I met her through him. And she and I became super close because of this experience. And he is eternally grateful to me that I could be there for his wife in a time when he couldn't, just to be on the phone with her for an hour, And this is the value of friendship. But somebody has to make the rule. Somebody has to say, hey, new rule amongst friends, no crying alone, I had another experience with another friend. My friend Maria is at her house, and we're just catching up. And she told me how the week before she went through real bad time. And I was like, why didn't you call me? Like, I'm here for you. Like, why didn't you call me? She says, I did. I'm like, no, you didn't. She's like, yeah, I texted you multiple times. I'm like, you did not. Otherwise, I would have responded. She goes, I did. And I pull out my phone and I look at the text and it says, hey, what you doing? Hey, want to come over? I'm like, you mean these texts? The ones that sound like all the other texts you send me? How do I know that's a cry for help? And she had read an article that said that when somebody's struggling, all they need is 8 minutes of attention to make them feel not alone, so they can sort of get through the rest of the day. So you don't have to give them 2, 3, 4 hours in that moment. They just need 8 minutes to sort of make them feel not alone, and you can reconnect with them later. So my friend and I, Maria and I, came up with a symbol, a sign, which is, if you really need someone, you simply send them a text that says, do you have 8 minutes? And that means, I need you. And anyone can step out of a meeting for 8 minutes and say, I'm here. I got you. I'll call you in an hour, but you're not alone. And so all these little things, all these little tricks of the trade help make friendships stronger and make people feel not alone. But as I'm talking about them, the question is how many of us are practicing them? And that's why I'm talking about them, because I want us to practice them.
Yeah, wow. 8 minutes to completely change somebody's day, a friend's day.
Well, if somebody's going through a hard time, and we know, like, we don't want to call our friends in hard times because we don't want to bother them. You know, we get insecure. You know, I know you're busy, but, you know, nobody's afraid to ask for 8 minutes, and everybody's available to give 8 minutes. So it's a low bar. And like, again, that doesn't solve the problem, but it allows you to be there for your friend, and it allows them to feel not alone. And when more time is available, then you should give that as well.
Wow. And what's the best way to show up for friends? Because I mean, I definitely show up for my friends. I'm a very loyal person. I find it really hard to let go of people. But sometimes I do get, you know, I'll admit, I get occasionally intimidated when somebody's having like a big, you know, and I know that my tendency is to want to put on like the fix-it hat, you know, and come to the rescue of friends, family members, and whatnot. And it's intimidating because, you know, I feel like I don't necessarily have all the answers.
Yeah. So men are worse than women. Men want to fix everything. Stop that. Sometimes you have to ask people what they want. Okay? First of all, you need to learn the skill of listening. It's a skill. Take a class. Like, you can go learn that skill.
Watch a podcast.
Watch a podcast, whatever it is. Like, go learn the skill of listening and be good at it. Active listening. And so I have learned to tell my friends what I need in that moment. So if I'm in a bad place, I'll call a friend and say, hey, do you have a minute? Don't try and fix anything. I just need you to listen. So I tell them what I want. Or you can be the one. If a friend calls you and they say, I'm in a bad place, you go, tell me what you need. Do you want me to just listen, or do you want me to offer solutions? They know what they want. They'll say, no, I just listen. But the default should be just listen. And at the end, say, do you want me to offer anything? You'd be like, no, I'm good. Thank you for listening. So stop, the default is just hold space. Learn to get into mud with people. They're in mud. That's how they feel. They don't want to be pulled out of the mud. They're not ready for that. They just want to feel not alone in the mud. And so your job is to sit next to them and let them say, God, this mud sucks. And you go, yeah, it does. And it's not fun for you, by the way. It is not fun to get into the mud with a friend. It's stressful. It's hard to see a friend in pain. It's awful. And you're going to sit in the mud with them because that's what friends do. And you're just going to sit there. And at some point, could be in that first interaction, it could be a day, it could be a week, could be a month. At some point, you're going to turn to them and go, do you want to get out? They go, yeah, I think I'm ready to get out now. And then you can go into fix-it mode.
I love that. Definitely lowers the bar.
Well, it also takes the stress away. Like, you don't have to have all the answers, but you do have to hold space. That's your only job, is to start by holding space. Unless they say, what do you think? That's a question. That's a request.
Yeah, realizing that has definitely made me, I think, a better friend. Because, if somebody comes to me with a wellness related question, something that's within my wheelhouse,
Sure.
I'm like, okay, let's get to work,
Or
you
not.
can fix that. Yeah, or not.
Like if I call you and be like, I'm struggling to motivate to work out, you're gonna be like, okay, this is what you need to do. Get an accountability buddy every day. Write down the one thing you're gonna do, right? I'm like, yep. You just made me feel even worse about myself because what I'm telling you is that I have no discipline, and you're telling me things that I struggle to do, and now I'm worse because you're really good at that stuff, and you just told me I'm bad at it. As opposed to saying, tell me more.
Yeah.
Well, I do this. Go on. Go on, what else? Tell me more. That's all you need to do. Go on, what else? Tell me more. Go on, what else? Tell me more. Go on, what else? Tell me more. Anything else? What else? Tell me more. Go on. Go on. What else? Tell me more. That's called active listening. And what you're doing in your brain is not waiting for your turn to speak. Right? This is a very Western thing where we have sort of like co-opted all of the great Eastern trainings and turned them into businesses, right? So like I remember I was in a meeting. I was in a meeting, and the person sitting next to me was this apparently well-known yoga teacher. And the whole time we were in the meeting, she was on her phone underneath the table. And I don't mean like she was like texting with her family because like her grandma was in the hospital or something. Like she was on social media, I could see, right? And she's just looking down while we're in the meeting. And at some point, the conversation turned to being present. And she popped up her head and said, that's why I love yoga, because it helps me be present. And I'm like, you're an idiot, right? And that's when I realized that we've completely misunderstood or sort of failed to grasp the lessons of all these things. It's like, all of these people who are fighting for a yoga mat and angry because they're late to the yoga class. Like, you've completely lost the plot here, right? Like, she's lost the plot, and she's apparently one of the gurus, right? And then I got to thinking about meditation. I've learned how to meditate. And yes, there are tremendous amounts of personal benefits that come from meditation, and I'm sure you've talked about them and you've had guests that talk about them, and they're all true. Yes, 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 yes. And there's also social benefits to meditation, not just personal benefits to meditation. So for example, when you meditate, you have to focus on one thing. You can't clear your head. That doesn't exist. It's impossible. But you focus on your mantra or a dot on the wall or a sound or your breath, whatever. You focus on one thing. And it's hard. We get distracted. And we learn to say, okay, that was a thought. I'm going to put that thought out of my head. I'm going to come back to it later. I'm going to go back to focusing on the thing I'm supposed to be focusing on, my breath, my dot, my mantra, whatever. Right? And you get really good at it. You have this amazing, calm, meditative state that makes you, quote unquote, fully present. Right? Now, that's a skill that you get to give to others. You're not fully present until somebody else says you are. So when your friend is saying, I'm struggling, are you thinking about the solution? That's your thought. You should be focusing on one thing and one thing only, what your friend is saying, fully present. And if you have another thought, you put it out of your head and say, I'll deal with that later. Right now, my focus is on my friend. And at the end of that conversation, you will know you have been present when your friend says, hey, thanks for listening. When they say, thanks for being present, I really appreciate it. And all that meditation you've been doing was practice so you can serve your friends when they need you there. So yes, I do believe in meditation, but I believe it's not just a selfish act, that there's a pro-social component, which is you're learning a valuable skill set to be there for others. And you don't know that you are, I love being present. You don't know that until somebody affirms it.
I feel like technology and social media particularly are like the antithesis to meditation, because your devices are always around, exerting a gravitational pull.
Yours is in your pocket. Mine is not here.
Where's yours?
I left it over there. I don't
Really?
know. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I feel like that's interesting.
And I do that. If I'm going to be focused on something, I don't want to have a buzzing, beeping thing in my pocket. Even if it's on silent, I know stuff's coming in. I very often put my phone on airplane mode when I have to do something, because then I know nothing's coming in. When I go out for dinner with friends, I very often put my phone in airplane mode. Nothing's coming in. In a meeting, I put it in airplane mode, or put it in another room. Nothing's coming in. I know nothing's coming in. So there's no dopamine. There's no that fear that I'm missing something. So you can game the system the other way around too.
Yeah.
You can take the dopamine addiction away.
In the grander scheme of things, though, do you think it's helping or hurting, or it's
I think the data on this is well established. Of course it's hurting us.
it's hurting?
Yeah. I mean, Jonathan Haidt he's been, all over the press lately with his work. But there are many others talking about it. I've talked about it as well. For me, the insidious nature of phones and social media is partially what it does to adults, but mostly what it does to children. Children require double the amount of dopamine to get the same sense of hit than adults get, which means they're using the devices more to get the same feelings, which means it's like you need 2 shots versus 1 shot to get a buzz, right? But you're still putting 2 shots in your body. And we know the data from alcohol. We know that children that accidentally discover alcohol before the age of like 14 or 15. So adolescence is a stressful time. It's hard. And some children accidentally discover alcohol to numb the effects of that stress. And if you look at alcoholics only drink for a finite number of reasons: social stress, financial stress, career stress, or personal stress. That's pretty much it, right? It's a numbing. And the data shows that when kids accidentally discover alcohol before the ages of 14 to 15, something like 70% of them are likely to become alcoholics.
Wow.
Whereas if they wait till something like 19, that number plummets to like 17%, right? And what we're supposed to learn when we're young is how to make friends and rely on our friends in times of stress. So when we give access to dopamine-producing devices, like social media or our phones, we're basically opening up the liquor cabinets and saying to our kids, as you go through the stress of adolescence, this will numb the stress, which it does. It also increases the stress because now you have FOMO. Now the best description of Instagram I ever heard was, happy pictures of unhappy people. And let's be very clear what social media has become. A friend of mine just said this to me, and I love this, which is social media is for marketing. If you're not marketing on social media, you're not using it right. Everybody's marketing something, a product, themselves, their brand, their happiness. Everybody's selling something to everybody else, right? Like the people who put on their Instagram, happy birthday, Dad, with a carousel of baby pictures of their dad holding them on his shoulders. Your dad's not on Instagram.
Yeah.
Who are you marketing to? You want your friends to see that you're a good kid and you love your dad.
Virtue signaling.
It's marketing. It's some sort of selling, right? And that's part of the problem, which is when kids are overwhelmed by that. The likelihood that they will become addicted to the device, the social media, or something else, right, dramatically goes up, which means if you take them once they're older and now they're in school, or now they're when they're in college, or now they're in a job, their ability to manage and cope with stress has been stunted, which is why you see rising rates of anxiety, depression, and in the worst cases, suicide, because they never learned how to call a friend and say, I'm struggling. And so we need to teach kids how to lean on friends. And parents are partially to blame, right? Kids come over to the house, all the 10-year-olds, 12-year-olds come over to the house, and they're all sitting in a room on their phones. Good parents need to take all the phones away, put them in a bowl, and say, you can all have your cell phones back when you leave. And you call all the parents, because you talk to the parents because you made the play dates. You call all the parents and say, so I'm taking the phones away so the kids will play. If you need your kid, here's my number. Call me. I'm with them, and I will let you talk to your kid. But don't bother texting or phoning your kid. They won't have your phone. They won't have their phone, right? But we don't do that, right? So parents play the parents who set a bad model, right? The parents are on their phone all the time. The parents are on their phone at the dinner table. Kids will follow the lead. So parents have to hold themselves to a much higher standard. Do you let your kids have their phones in their bedrooms? Do you let the kids use their phone whenever they want? Do you make the kids sign a contract? You and I had to sign a contract when we got a cell phone. If a kid says, I want a cell phone, pull out the terms. You may never have it in your bedroom. You may never charge it in your bedroom. You have to keep it in another room. You have it for this many hours. If you do something and we punish you, you're going to lose your phone for a week each time you violate any one of these terms. Sign on the bottom line. You can throw a couple straw dogs in there for negotiation if you want. right? We have to sign a contract. They should sign a contract. And they know the terms of having a cell phone before they get it, with very strict rules. That's the deal.
It's not a bad idea.
We don't do it, though.
Do you see people returning to dumb phones? People ever see a dumb phone from Apple?
I don't think Apple will sell us a dumb phone, but I think there is just like there's now a return to tube socks, all things come around. The good news is I actually think young people are questioning the world that they've been raised in. They're questioning the kind of capitalism they've been raised in, where shareholder supremacy, short-term value, using mass layoffs to balance the books, all of these things that I also rail against. I love that the young generation is saying, we'd like a capitalism. We like capitalism, but we'd like a capitalism that considers the environment and considers the well-being of people and maybe prioritizes a person over profit. There was a study done recently that a friend was telling me about that they looked at all of the unhappiest people and the cultures of their companies, and all of them prioritized profit above all else. And so I love that young people are questioning the systems they've grown up in. And young people are saying cell phones may be bad. Let us try flip phones, dumb phones. I love that, and I hope they produce a market, because the way capitalism works is a lot of companies are just whores, and if there's demand, they'll fill it. And so if kids are asking for dumb phones, that means dumb phones will start getting cool again. And they'll make them fashionable and red and pink and and cool looking and
I do think that is the issue with capitalism. That when one of the many issues with I'm pro-capitalism.
Let's make a distinction. It's modern capitalism.
Yeah.
Right. It's not the capitalism that Adam Smith envisioned, that literally made America great. Like that capitalism. That capitalism has been abandoned in the 80s, 90s, and 2000s because of the work of Milton Friedman, the economist, who theorized that the responsibility of capitalism is to maximize profit within the bounds of the rules. Didn't talk about ethics. And that philosophy, which is complete bullshit, was embraced in the 80s and 90s and 2000s by people like Jack Welch. And a lot of the policies that were set in place in those time periods also were undermined by that. Underpinned by that philosophy. So you started to see the rise of mass layoffs, for example. Like, our company's profitable, just not as profitable as we promised, you lose your job. That did not exist in the United States prior to the 1980s. It didn't exist. The shareholder supremacy concept didn't exist like it does today. Didn't exist. When companies announce that they're investing in R&D, the stock price goes down. If they announce layoffs, the stock price goes up. That's madness, and that's a modern occurrence. So Jack Welch, who was the CEO of GE, he was really the poster child for short-termism, shareholder supremacy, pitting your people against each other, mass layoffs, all of that crap. And so we live in a world with twisted capitalism, distorted capitalism. So we have to be careful about throwing the baby out with the bathwater, right? There's a whole populist anti-capitalism movement afoot, but it's throwing the baby out with the bathwater. Yes, let us change the form of capitalism we have now, which is destructive to individuals and economies, but let us go back and embrace a constructive form of capitalism, which existed prior to the 1980s, which was much more cooperative, people-focused. People wished to give their entire lives to one company and get a gold watch at the end of their careers. There was loyalty offered to the company, and there was loyalty given from the company. And now there's an entire generation. You have people listening to this podcast right now who, when I talk about getting a gold watch, they have no idea what I'm talking about. They don't know what that means. They don't know what that metaphor means, which is twisted. And people do not want to give an entire life to a company anymore because they've grown up in a system where they watch their parents or their friends' parents get laid off through no fault of their own. It is not a meritocracy. We do not live in a meritocracy anymore. That you're a great employee, but sorry, we didn't make our numbers. You get to lose your job. Nothing personal. It's just business. No, very personal. It's just business. And so I don't blame them for saying I refuse to be loyal to my company. That's the rules the company set into play. The employers are just playing by the rules. I think it's time we change those rules, that we offer loyalty and we'll get it back in that order.
Yeah, well, it's just the fact that, I mean, if you were to die today, tomorrow there'd be a job posting. You'd be replaced the next day by your company. Yeah. And that's sad.
I mean, it's worse.
And there's the facade of loyalty, like every Friday pizza in the rec room as a thank you to.
Those
employees.
have, again, the tactics. It depends why the tactics are being deployed. Because the tactics of pizza on Fridays amongst a really great, wonderful team is great, but if it's done as filler, then it's terrible. So we have to be careful about judging the tactics because it depends on what's underneath them. But your point is well taken, which is I think, we'll take my work, right? Which is every company now says we have a purpose, and it's written on their website. Now, how many companies are making decisions based on that purpose? Not many. In other words, marketing, right? It's nonsense. They're doing it because social convention dictates that they have to. Now, in my world, I would say, well, at least it's a step in the right direction. Now let's get them to actually follow that purpose. But to your point, there's a lot of window dressing of look at our great culture, right? Until I miss my numbers and the executives at the top who are incentivized. Take a look at Boeing. Boeing is a great example of it happening in the extreme. There are many, 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 many companies who are run like Boeing. And by the way, the CEO of Boeing is an ex-GE guy, ex-Jack Welch protege. So he embodies all that short-term, sort of shareholder value, over-indexing. And he prioritized numbers and schedule over everything else. And now planes are falling out of the sky. And for me, the problem is that we don't hold executives accountable. They set the culture, they set the incentive structures, and they should be held responsible for the behaviors that those incentive structures created. Yes, more junior people will get fired because they have to be held responsible for their actions, but it won't happen at the top, right? Even Wells Fargo, when they were opening all the fake accounts so they could hit their numbers, the only reason the CEO got fired is because of unbelievable public pressure. Otherwise, it wouldn't have happened. If you want my opinion, I think the CEOs who create these cultures that create such toxic environments that are driven by profit above all else to the point where a plane falls out of the sky and doors go flying off because the bolts weren't properly put on, they belong in jail. And if you start putting CEOs in jail for creating cultures that drive abhorrent behavior, all of a sudden you'll find things go just fine.
Yeah.
Because it's called accountability. But there's no accountability. Or they pay a fine without pleading guilty as a company. No, guilty. And if they go out of business, so be it. They're the ones who set the wheels in motion, and the long-term effects are their responsibility. The long-term impacts are their responsibility. And GE is a great example, not to harp all over GE, but the system that Jack Welch built, GE is a piece of shit now. That company is a shadow of its former self. It's better chopped up and sold off into small parts, Now, there are elements of GE that are still functioning, but as a conglomerate, who cares? Nobody's following their example. No one. And the stuff that Jack Welch did damaged an economy and did great damage to the United States. And it is our responsibility, you and me and everybody listening, whether you are work in a company or own a company, whether you're in a management position or a junior level position, to do everything we can to undo the capitalism that we've been given, that we've grown up in, and turn it into something magical and beautiful again that prioritizes people and ethics and customers and employees, all of which turns out benefit a shareholder. In that order.
Yeah, companies love to project this idea that they're.
Shouldn't we be talking about health and wellness?
Yeah. Well, it's such an important conversation because companies, I feel like I'm generally in favor of less regulation as opposed to more, but the caveat is that regulation is important when there's the potential of bodily injury and harm. And a lot of these companies are doing significant harm when they let the market decide. And that's why you get, all kinds of crazy. That's why your average supermarket today, 73% of the products in your average supermarket are ultra processed.
Yeah, of course.
Because we've let the market decide.
Because it's cheaper. And that's the problem, which is it's not no regulation, it's the right regulations, right? Like the amount of pesticides that are allowed in Europe and the UK are just they don't meet the levels in the United States. Like literally there are pesticides that are illegal in Europe that we use freely. There are pesticides where the accepted amounts in Europe are like 400 times here. And it's really funny because, there's a percentage of our population that believes that vaccines are having, deleterious effects on their children. But what about pesticides? What about the food we're giving our children? You know this better than I do, which is if you look at the ingredients on two of the same product, one in Europe and one in the United States, it's literally healthier to eat it in Europe. Like a Kit Kat is healthier in Europe than it is in America because there it's made with butter and sugar. And here it's made with high fructose corn syrup and partially hydrogenated oils.
Yeah.
Like the same products are worse for us here. Fruit and vegetables are bad for us here. Like what? Because of the pesticides. And you can't escape it. I heard a thing once, which you'll probably get a kick out of. Because of the amount of preservatives we eat in America, Americans decompose slower than Europeans.
Oh my God, that's horrifying. That's horrifying.
But this, I think it's actually a very interesting conversation to combine the conversation about capitalism with health and wellness.
Yeah.
Because going to work directly affects how you feel. And a healthy kind of capitalism will make you enjoy going to work, and you're going to learn skills about how to have conflict, how to resolve conflict, how to talk to people. Like work will give you those skills, and you'll feel connected to something and other people, and you'll live longer and be healthier. Whereas coming to work every day with fear and excessive amounts of cortisol, that screws with your body. Fear that you're going to lose your job on any day, fear that you can get in trouble. That screws with your health.
Yeah.
And I think more needs to be talked about how, in addition to exercise and nutrition, healthy corporate culture directly impacts the health of our minds, our bodies, and our longevity.
Definitely. Have you seen that meme on social media? I'm sure you've seen it, where it's like, there's a...
Did you realize I was going to bring my soapbox today? I brought a big one today.
No, I like it.
I didn't.
I like it getting spicy. Getting spicy. We like that on the show. There's that great meme. It's like, come join our fast-paced, high-energy work environment. And then the next line is the environment, and it shows like a cubicle.
Yeah.
That's
funny.
Yeah. That is not...
Like that's how many emails you can answer. That's the fast pace.
And that wreaks havoc on your health. I mean, asking somebody to sit for 9 hours a day, the stress.
I like offices. I know there's a big movement and still some debate about remote work and all of that stuff.
Because of the social aspect?
I like the social aspect, yeah. And young people who started their careers during COVID, who they got used to working at home and they like it, but now they're suffering anxiety and some of the other challenges of being alone all the time. And when they come to work, they're like, and they think it's the work. It's not the work. That's like the reaction to, and you need to sort of like acclimate to people. But I think being around people, even for introverts, and I think some sort of blended model, but even for introverts, it's important to be around people.
Is the work culture different in Europe? You spent a lot of time in Europe, in London, right?
Yeah. I think they have the same challenges with the debate about remote and not remote, and but I think, I live in Los Angeles, where there's the public transportation system here is not so great.
No.
And I like cities with great public transportation.
Yeah.
London, Paris, New York, DC. Because you're around people. You sit on a subway next to a person. It's just you're sort of forced to understand that I'm in the world and I'm not alone. And I think that's a good lesson to learn.
Yeah, those micro interactions are really hard to come by here in LA. You've got to really go the extra mile. I try to chat it up with the people.
Literally.
Yeah.
You have to go another mile.
You do. Quite literally. Talk to me about the infinite game. I actually became aware of this concept, and I'm so psyched that you wrote a book about it. Yeah. Back when I was at Current TV, the difference between the so-called infinite game and the finite game.
Yeah.
But if you could unpack that for my audience.
Sure. So in the mid-1980s, a philosopher and theologian named Dr. James Carse defined these two types of games quite brilliantly. Finite games and infinite games. A finite game is known players, fixed rules, and an agreed upon objective. Football, baseball. If there's a winner, then there has to be a loser or losers. And more important, there's always a beginning, a middle, and an end. Then there are infinite games. Infinite games are known and unknown players, which means you don't necessarily know who all the other players are. The rules are changeable, which means every player can play however they want. And the objective is to stay in the game as long as possible, to perpetuate the game. We are players in infinite games every day of our lives, whether we know it or not. Nobody wins career. Nobody's ever going to be declared the winner of health, right? Or education or learning. And there's definitely no such thing as winning business. Like when Circuit City went bankrupt, Best Buy didn't win anything, right? And every company can run however they want. They can hire however they want, it's all those things. In other words, these things are infinite games. And the problem is when we play with a finite mindset in an infinite game, when we play to win in a game that has no finish line, there are very consistent and predictable outcomes. Decline of trust, decline of cooperation, decline of innovation. So you have to play for the game that you're in. Now, there are finite games within the infinite game. So your company is playing in the infinite game of business. But if you have a pitch, there's a beginning, middle, and end. There are agreed upon rules. And there's going to be a winner and there's going to be losers. So play with the mindset to win in the pitch. But the minute you win the pitch, now you have to do the work. Think of it like politics. A campaign, an election, there's a beginning, middle, and end. There's fixed rules. There's a winner and there's a loser. But once they win their election, now they have to govern. We want them to stop campaigning and we want them to govern, which is more infinite-minded. We want them to stop trying to get wins against each other and actually work together. It's called governing. But they don't make that mindset shift and we get screwed. Well, it's the same in business. When people play to win all the time, customers, employees get screwed, right? Not to harp on Boeing and GE, but they were obsessed with winning. Jack Welch literally wrote a leadership book called Winning, which is the opposite of finite and infinite games. And it does tremendous damage when the game is infinite. So that's what I wrote about. I wrote about the existence of these two types of games. And because we already know how to play finite games, I wrote about what it takes to play an infinite game, what it takes to embrace and have an infinite mindset.
Well, it's applied to life. I think it's such a powerful metaphor. It's about appreciating the journey, right? Like I wake up every day excited to go to the gym, not because I have some destination in mind. I'm sure some people do engage with fitness for a given destination, whether it be a competition or whatnot. But for me, I just love the journey.
And nobody wins working out.
Yeah.
Now, you can have finite goals. You can have a weight goal. You can get in shape for your wedding. You can get in shape for a competition. You can get in shape for some athletic competition. But there's a beginning, a middle, and end to that. But you have to keep working out for the rest of your life. Once you hit that goal, hit that number, whatever it is, hit that, dress size, whatever it is, well, you still have to, if you want to stay healthy, you have to keep working out. It is infinite. And so you can have finite games within the infinite game, but the infinite game is, as you said, it's a lifestyle. And we don't treat business like a lifestyle. We don't treat learning like a lifestyle. We treat learning like school. Get an A, move on, beginning, middle, and end, right? But, lifelong learners, lifelong healthy people, like these are lifestyles. Business should be a lifestyle.
Yeah. But there's an interesting connection to be made between that infinite mindset and happiness.
Oh, for sure. Because you keep the world in context, right? There's the best way to understand it and why it's related to happiness. There's this Chinese story that's told. It's told many ways. This is the way I know it. There's a young man born with the remarkable ability of horse riding, just gifted natural talent. And everyone in the village says, "You're so lucky." And the monk says, "We'll see." And he falls off his horse and breaks his leg and ends his career. And everyone in the village says, "You're so unlucky." And the monk says, "We'll see." And war breaks out, and all the men are sent to battle, and he can't go because of his busted leg. And everybody in the village says, "You're so lucky." And the monk says, "We'll see." And you look at our lives, like good news, bad news, who knows? I can tell you some of the worst things that have happened to me in my life, like my complete loss of passion and depression back when, turned out to reveal to me the golden circle. Do I want to go through that again? Absolutely not. Am I glad it happened? Yes. Good news, bad news, who knows? And so if you start to view all the things that happen to you in your life as part of a continuum rather than individual and complete packets, complete events, you start to sort of embrace this infinite mindset. And when negative things happen, you sort of take them in stride a lot better. But when good things happen, you also don't overblow it and be like, "This is it, I'm the best." You're like, well, maybe, good news, bad news, we'll see. And when you sort of like have that approach, it is more stoic. It is more long-termist. It is more realistic, believe it or not. And it does produce a calm. You know, I think in one's life, that is, to your point, I think an infinite mindset absolutely brings more joy to a life and a career.
Yeah,
Sure.
and applied to health and wellness. I mean, you know, this is the lifestyle that is health and wellness. You want to basically orient your approach so as to continue playing.
Yeah.
You know, I love it. And is this related to the golden circle?
I mean, all of my work sort of builds upon the last thing. So it builds upon it.
Love it. What's next for you?
I'm writing a book about friendship.
Damn, cool.
With a friend, because what else? What better way to write a book about friendship than with a friend?
It's fun to collaborate with friends on.
It's hard to write a book with somebody though, but we'll figure it out.
Well, what about, don't they say like you don't want to work with your friends? Isn't that like common lore in order to preserve friendships? Don't involve them in your financial endeavors. I guess you found that not to be.
I've worked with friends and it's been amazing. You know, it changes the dynamic for sure. It'll change the relationship. It has to. But whatever.
Yeah.
Depends on the friend.
Depends on the friend.
Depends on me.
Yeah. Love it. Do you have a wellness practice?
Well, I think everything we've been talking about is wellness practice. I think infinite mindset is a wellness practice. I think asking myself what good will come of this is a wellness practice. I think recognizing that any practice of meditation is for the good of others is a wellness practice. I think focusing on friends is the ultimate wellness practice. So I guess the simple answer is yes.
Love it. Well, thanks for coming out.
Thanks for having me.
Hey, if you liked that video, you need to check out this one here, and I'll see you there.